welcome to a new knitting episode from me. My name is Helle and I'm coming to you from Denmark. And it's now officially too cold to sit outside and film. And I don't think the lighting is ideal here, so I may have to change around in the future. But it's actually a beautiful autumn day. It's just about maybe 5-6 degrees Celsius, so just a bit too cold to sit outside. But welcome, if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you're new, welcome here. So glad you decided to take a chance on me. I have quite a few things on the agenda, which is sort of the same sentence I keep on beginning with. I guess that's because a number of weeks have passed by since I last filmed. So I have 2 finished objects and I have a work in progress. And then I'd like to share a little bit about some of the plans I have. Plans that might come to fruition, some that might not. So there's a little bit of regular planning where I actually have the yarn and I do plan to knit it. And then there's going to be a bit of dream knitting where I'm not sure. It's like the minute I plan something, a part of my brain says, we're going to go elsewhere. So welcome, and I hope you will find something here that's to your liking. Can I also just add that if you're like me and you're not going to Rhinebeck, you may be experiencing a bit of FOMO these days. I certainly do. So everyone who's going, I wish you joy, and I hope it's going to be great. And I look forward to seeing some of your podcasts afterwards. But man, major FOMO. But there you go. I will have to make do with a trip to Copenhagen on my birthday, probably, which is coming up in a few days. And that's also fine. So if you've been here before, you know that I like to share a little quote to sort of set the mood for the day. And sometimes I can't limit myself to one quote, so I have a few for you today. I hope that's all right. There was a viewer who left a really lovely comment on my last video, and she followed it by saying that she had turned 70 and she now claims all the colors. And after that she said, I wear what I want. And I just thought, amen. I think that's what we all should do. There's a lot of talk about colors and which colors suit me, and I'm into those colors and I'm not into those colors. Do whatever you want, and as you can see here, I've certainly stepped a little outside of my neutrals comfort zone. In fact, I'm stepping more and more away from that, but there's still colors that I haven't used much. Maybe in the future. Why limit ourselves? And I think also there's a sense of freedom with that when you say that. And once you take that sense of freedom upon you, it's like you kind of allow others to do the same. Choose whatever you want. Claim all the colors. I love that sentence. And then there's a concept I'm going to introduce later. Maybe I should just wait. I can already hint here, it's the concept of wabi-sabi. I'll get into that with my other finished project. I'll just, I'll leave that for when I get into it. Briefly, I just want to mention something that has nothing to do with knitting whatsoever. But, I was in doubt whether I should address it or not. But it's basically the whole situation in Israel and Palestine, which is on everybody's mind, I guess, certainly on mine. And I've been watching the news, as I imagine a lot of us have. And of course, this podcast is in no way connected to any kind of politics, but to our shared sense of humanity. In that sense, I wanted to just briefly address it so as not to pretend it's not there, if you understand what I mean. I grieve for the tragic loss of life, all those children, no matter what country they're from. And I just wanted to share one quote that I think, for me, could be kind of a beacon. And it's a quote by Eckhart Tolle, whose words of wisdom have followed me throughout the last 20 plus years. And to me, he's one of the wisest people on the planet. And he said this. He said, love is the recognition of oneness in the world of duality. And to me, that's just, it's not necessarily something that's easy to embody, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And I love that. It's a quote that is good at any time. And I for one would like to try to embody that. So moving on to my first finished object, which is of course what I'm wearing, and it's the Soldotna crop by Caitlin Hunter of Boyland Knitworks, I think. And it's the one that I have been looking so much forward to, where I was going to use the yarn from the Lamb and Kid, kindly gifted to me by Sherry. Thank you again so much, Sherry, from Washington State. And I have a lot of things to say about this sweater. First of all, it's delightful. I love it so much. It's super soft. It's also quite warm, because while it's cold outside, it's not really cold in here. So it's certainly warm. I have already tried to wear it with a long sleeve t-shirt underneath and without a t-shirt underneath. So I'll try to show you clips of that as well, so you can see the bottom part of it where I'm walking around as per usual. And let me just get into some of the details here. The yarn, or the pattern, of course, is not written for this kind of yarn, so I had to make a lot of modifications. And the way this came about, the color choices and the pattern, is that I already had the Soldotna in my favorites list on Ravelry. And then when I apparently talked about the Lemon Kit in one of my previous videos, Sherry contacted me to say that she would kindly give me this yarn. And I just went berserk looking at the Lemon Kid's website. And one of those diet to order events was coming up like 3 days later, maybe 4 days later. And it was on, one of the bases was Big Birdie, which this is knitted in. And of course I went on their website and I checked out the colors that they had. And it was immediately clear, which I also kind of knew in advance, that I wouldn't be moving within my very neutrals, pale, muted colors. Because if I wanted a color work, which to me I felt that yarn invited, and also, just to do something a little different, then I would have to do something a little bolder. I also felt that since the yarn is American and Sherry is American, I wanted to knit a pattern by an American knitwear designer. And I'd already looked at a lot of Caitlin Hunter's patterns. I think she has some beautiful patterns, and she has a lot of color work patterns. So I thought, let me do that, because I haven't done that much color work. And I took a look at the Soldotna. No, what I did was I looked at projects on Ravelry that were made with Big Birdie. And one of the ones that cropped up was precisely the Soldotna, made by this prolific, talented knitter called Margot Chien, I think. I'm not sure. And she's, she makes all these gorgeous colorwork sweaters. And she had done, I think, 2 Soldotnas in Big Birdie. So that gave me an idea that it could be done, even though the gauge is completely off. And then there was, a while back, I had seen this dress that I'd just taken a screenshot of on my phone because I liked the colors. The combination of colors was something I wouldn't have thought of myself if I hadn't seen that dress. And so I thought, when this opportunity came up, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that dress. There were some colors in that. Okay, yarn in my eyelashes. There were some colors in that I thought that they could maybe work for the Soldotna. And then I had that photo, and then I went on the Lemon Kid website, and I found colors that matched it pretty much, I felt. And I sent the pictures off to Sharon, and she's like, great, excellent, love the photo and love the colors. And on the day that the colors were available, or the yarns were available, she drove to the shop on Bainbridge Island, and she contacted me, like we'd arranged to chat, I think, on Instagram. And she so 10 minutes before, I was on Instagram, and then she filmed little clips of her driving to the shop and filming inside the shop. And I actually saved those clips, but unfortunately they are on my old account, the one that was hacked. If you've been here before, you will maybe remember that my old Instagram account was hacked. But it was just so much fun to see her walk into the shop and drive up there, and I could see what it looked like outside and things. And then she showed me the shop, and I was just, oh, wow. I mean, that's a beautiful shop, a wonderful yarn shop. And she then went on to contact a woman who's also written a lovely comment on here at some point, who helped her pick out these colors. And then she showed me, would these do and would these do? And I was sitting there at home looking at her present the colors, and it was just such a great experience. And then, she arranged with the shop that when they were available, they would ship them. So a few weeks later, I forget when, but some weeks later I had them, and then I could begin to swatch. So it's been a long process because I've been very keen to do the yarn and the pattern and the gift of it justice. I hope I have. So what I can tell you is that I've certainly made the smallest size as per the pattern in order to make something that would fit me at all. It's still a lot larger than the smallest size using the original yarn, of course. And I had to try, it was trial and error for a long time. So what needles did I use? I think I used, I cast on using 5 or 5.5 millimeter. And then I think I was supposed to, no, actually, I first cast on using something close to the original needles, which was like 3.5 or 4. And I soon found out that the pattern was way too dense with this yarn. It was like a carpet or something. So it would have no drape. So I ripped that out, cast on again. And then I tried with, I think a 5 millimeter. And then I continued, no, 5.5. Then I continued with that. There are short rows on the back to raise the neck a little. And I realized soon that because I was purling, and I use, by the way, German short rows. She uses wrap and turn, but I'm familiar with German short rows, so that's what I used. And I could see that the fabric was becoming too loose. So what I've realized is that my purl stitches will change depending on what yarn I use. So sometimes when I knit flat, i.e. have pearls, the purl stitches become looser. Sometimes they become tighter if it's a tinier yarn. So here for sure they became looser. So I ripped it out again, and then I did it on 5 millimeter. I think this bit, the gray bit at the top where I did there's a larger section you'll see on the back. I did that with 5 millimeter, and then I changed to 6 millimeter or US 10 when I went to the color work. So it's quite a bit bigger than what the pattern calls for, of course. But it's also a question of what you want the stitches to look like, because the stitches will become too cramped and dense if you use too small a needle, for me anyway, especially here when you have 2 yarns per row. Sometimes, further down here I have sometimes 3. Do I? Well, no, I think I only have 2 yarns per row, but that's pretty dense also. And then when I came down here, when I had to separate for sleeves and knit the rest of the body, first of all, you can see here this bit, the people who had, there are others who also had made the Soldotna in Big Birdie, and all of them have, or not all of them, but most of them have left out the little specks here, and or whatever, flecks, dots, loops, lice, surely not, but most of them have left them out. And I thought, well, I kind of want to keep them in because I liked how I had the opportunity to continue with some of the colors, so it would be sort of the mint here wasn't finished when I came down here. So I chose to include that. And also when I separated for sleeves here, I had quite a lot of stitches. You can also see here that I do have quite a lot of fabric. I think it's all right when I stand up. It's I feel a little cramped here when I'm sitting like this, but you can see there's quite a bit of fabric. And I could see that also on the samples I'd seen on Ravelry. There's quite a bit of fabric on the back, but it's a nice drape and it's a cozy garment. So I think that's all right. Depends on what you expect. It's not the tight little Soldotna version of the original yarn, and that's fine because I knew that. But I could also see that some of the people who wore theirs, and according to the notes of Ravelry, had not made any modifications. The garments were big, and if these people were taller than me, it would look pretty okay. But that meant that for me, it probably it would be too much fabric. So I didn't pick up quite as many stitches under the arms that I was supposed to, or I think I picked them up in order to have space for the sleeves, and then I decreased quite a bit. I will try to put all my modifications on Ravelry because I honestly don't even remember all of them. I did so much math because once I decreased here, I had to figure out, well, how do I then figure out the space between the dots and maybe even up here. Yeah. Oh, what I did was actually, I think already here, by the time I made this particular line, by the time I made the orange, actually, I left out the increases on that row, and then I left them out once more, so that I actually have fewer increases than the pattern and then the other Big Birdie versions. And that was because I could see that there was a lot of fabric, and when I tried it, when I was about here maybe, I could see that it was going to become pretty big, and I wasn't, I didn't want a poncho or a swancho or something. So I left out some of the decreases, and of course that increases. I left out some of the increases. But that meant, of course, I had to do some serious math in order for the pattern still to fit. So I counted the number of stitches in the final pattern repeat, and then multiplied that by the number of stitches I pretty much had to see how many increases do I still need to make in order for me to be sure that I can do the right number of pattern increases and I don't have 2 random stitches left or something. So that was a bit of a challenge, but it was actually simple. It sounds complex when I'm explaining it now, but it actually was not very complex because I'm not a math person, but I was able to do it. And in terms of colors, or the colors that I used, I can show you what I have left of some of them. I have this much of the mint or chalet chic left. I have this much of the pink left, so not quite as much. And of this gray, I have nothing left. I played yarn chicken till the very end. So had I gone with the original width, I would have had to alternate with the other gray, which was a little darker. That would have been okay, but I probably wouldn't have found out until I was down here. So that was all right. And let me just show you also, I have this much left of the flu orange, which is like I would say it's not yellow, it's not orange, it's like a flame color, which is of course very far away from the colors that I usually choose, but I think it kind of makes all the difference here because these are sort of cool colors. Oh, let me show you the others in case you can't quite see. So this is flu orange. That was chalet chic. This is pop rocks, of course. That was the one I knew I wanted. And this is barred. And then the gray that I have here, the light gray, and also up here is cloud. And this is bell bottom blues, and it's a blue that's not very blue, and it's actually on the background here, and I also have it with the mint colored dots down here. It's not very easy to see, so it's a hint of blue rather than a lot of blue. And I think the fun part, but also the challenging part, was figuring out which color do I want now. I think oh my gosh, let me show you. I actually colored in the drawing that she has, and then I copied that over onto other pieces of paper so that I made all these little attempts at figuring out which colors I wanted. And I also made something like this where I put it on sort of graph paper and all sorts of things with crayons to figure out what order do I want the colors in. which color looks best after what other color. And in the end, I didn't really look at those drawings. Maybe it was a good sort of initial thing to do in order to get an understanding of which colors looked best together. But then I ended up wrapping them around a piece of cardboard to see which colors looked good with which colors. And then I also wanted to space them out sort of, so that I had, not too much pink right after each other, and a nice amount of the mint or the chalet chic, etc., so that there was a kind of symmetry or balance or harmony or something. And I also knew that I wanted the pink to play a major part. So I'd already decided I wanted the pink in this one, because to me that one was very clear, very apparent. First I thought I wanted the mint down here, but since I had the pink for the bottom, I could see that I needed that here also for it to come together. And also these colors that are muted, the colors that I normally gravitate to, I felt they were important to sort of offset the other more bold colors, so that it would be a good balance. So this one, the Bard, is the one I have in between all of them, all the way through, which sort of, I don't know. To me, it's it's like an internal framework, that this one places itself in the background, and that means the others can sort of move into the foreground. But if I had chosen only bold colors, it would have been too much, I feel. I'm not sure, but I feel that way. Although, having said that, there are many lovely versions, and it's just so much fun to play with these colors. But I also did once or twice, if not 3 times, I started with one color and found out that no, I didn't want that one. For instance, here, I think I started that one with the vertical stripes. I started them with the fluo orange and decided it was too vibrant. I wanted them to be rather here, where it would be just slightly less. And also I wanted to up the mint color. So you can easily see which ones, once you begin to knit it, which ones become more dominant. And apropos dominant, since it's color work, if you haven't done much color work, I think the first time I did color work many years ago, I didn't think about dominant color at all. But now it's a thing, and understandably so. I did it wrong back then, no doubt. But when you have 2 colors, so for instance here, where I have the mint and the gray, I want the mint to pop. So when I have my fabric and I'm knitting, the 2 strands will sort of alternate. The 2 strands will take turns moving into the fabric as I knit that stitch. And I always held the one I wanted to pop, the contrast color, closest to the fabric. At least that's how I think of it language-wise, to have that color, that yarn, closest to the fabric, and the other one behind it, if you will, when you have your fabric in front of you. That's how it helps me, because I think somebody else talks about where you have it on your finger. Well, that depends. For me, it depends, at any rate. And I think also if you're not continental, you don't have your yarn there. If you don't knit continental, you don't have your yarn there. So the sweater in all weighs about 300 grams. So of course I have quite a bit left from all the yarns, except for Cloud. I have none of that left. So that's how much it weighs for me. I will put on Ravelry how much of each color I used or have left. I also just wanted to mention that I actually bought the pattern off Caitlin Hunter's website, Boyland Knitworks. Knitworks? Yeah. Caitlin Hunter's website. And of course you can buy it on Ravelry too, where you can buy most patterns these days. But I don't know if you've noticed, but they're a little more expensive. And I know that some knitwear designers have been hesitant to put all their patterns on Ravelry because it costs extra, which would explain why also Caitlin Hunter's patterns cost a little bit extra on Ravelry. So I think I was just coincidentally searching her website for different patterns, and I saw that the pattern was cheaper there. So for me, it's not necessary to have it in my Ravelry library, so I bought it through her website. Although I can also understand how Ravelry, of course, needs to, somebody needs to be paid to set up this website, so that's probably understandable. Just while I mention, or just when I remember it, let me just also remember to say that one of the things I like about Caitlin Hunter's patterns on her website, since the way you do test knitting in the United States and probably also in many other countries, but not Denmark, is that knitters use their own yarn, which means people have all sorts of different yarns. And she lists the kinds of yarn that people have used for some of her patterns. And that's really nice. So you can get sort of an insight into the possibilities. So I quite like that. I'm not sure the big birdie was on the Soldotna, but that's because none of the testers had used it. But it's there as an option. So what I've really found for me, this was definitely an exploration of colors and an exploration of how to modify chosen yarn to a pattern. And one thing I also wanted to say to newer knitters is that if you feel daunted by hearing about people's modifications, I was the same for a long time. People would always, I heard a lot of these podcasters talk about how they modified this and that, and then they made some extra short rows. I'm like, how do you just do that? How do you know to do that? And I'm not that freaked out about it anymore because I'm gradually beginning to know, okay, what sort of fit do I like? And I've tried many different techniques now, having knitted a number of different sweaters. And so it comes with experience. If you begin to pick up some of the different techniques and you don't just knit the same kind of garment. And you can get that experience also by knitting different designers, different kinds of garments, different kinds of projects. So little by little you become more familiar with what works for you, and then you begin to be a little braver, I find. So I think it's down to that. Although some people are very daring already, in the very beginning, and you can also do that or be that if you're not afraid to unravel. I just saw my cat walking by outside. So go ahead and try that. Something I just also wanted to maybe ask is when people say I went up a needle size or I went down a needle size, is that because it's American and you go from a 7 to an 8 or whatever? Because I always wonder, what then does that mean for European sizes? Because would that mean, if I think going up one needle size, for me that sounds as if I move, for instance, from a 5 to a 6, but in US needle sizes that would mean 2 needle sizes. So for me, linguistically, that would mean going up half a needle size from 5.5 to 6, for instance. I'm just sometimes in doubt. So if I was to be precise, I would say half a needle size when I talk about millimeter needles, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what is actually correct. I'm not sure it's important either. I've just thought about it when people mention it on a podcast. I'm like, if I want to replicate that, is it a whole needle size in millimeter or just a half? Not sure. Oh, and again, also when I had the short rows, when I made the short rows back here, I typically put in a little stitch marker for every short row, every German short row thingy, the double stitch, so that I can, for one thing, count how many I've done, so that I know the pattern asks me to do, for instance, 4 on each side, so that's 8 in all. If I can then count that I have actually 8 stitch markers, I know I will have done them all. But also to show myself where on the needle or in the fabric that I've done it, so that when I return and resolve them, I will resolve them all and not accidentally knit one of the double stitches as 2 stitches. So for me, it's just, for me, it's helpful to, it's a little sort of note to self, remember this. And there was somebody who wrote in the Nordic Knit-Along group on Ravelry that she had an extra stitch or something in the sweater she was knitting, and I asked, could that be the reason, because you had sort of forgotten that this one double stitch was just 1 stitch, and another woman had written she thought of the same. So it might be a good idea to add those little stitch markers, just to be sure. After a while, you probably don't need to because you'll begin to recognize them. But for me, it's still nice to be completely sure that I'm on the right track. So all in all, this would have been a really fast knit if I hadn't redone it so many times. But that's part of the fun here, to figure out which colors do I want, and sometimes something works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. That's the price you pay when you go rogue with a different yarn for a pattern that calls for something completely different. But I thought it was a lot of fun, and I love it so much. So thank you so much to you, Sherry. It's just lovely. And of course, I can't help wondering what I should make with the leftover yarns, because it's quite a lot. I've seen that there's a hat called Cloud made in this yarn that could be an idea. Not sure. If I completely disregard the VAT, I might feel tempted to buy one or two more skeins to, I don't know, do something. Because this is just, I'm for sure going to use this for something. A cardigan would also be lovely, or a shawl. I can completely recommend this yarn. It's super soft. It's fun to knit with, and if you know the colors and if you know what you're doing, it will go quite fast. So an absolute delight. So moving on to my other finished object, and this is where I kind of just want to introduce this concept, which, by the way, is also related to the woman in the knit along group who asked about that extra stitch, and she was worried, and she really wanted it to be perfect, and I can completely relate to that. You've spent so much time on your garment. You want it to look as good as you had hoped when you first began thinking about it. And there, I just really want to mention there's a sign on the wall in my local fitness center that I sometimes frequent, and it says progress, not perfection. And I think that's just that's what we want to have as our sort of goal. And if we do, then sometimes things aren't going to work out exactly the way we want, but they might be good enough. I've talked about this before, I think, and I think I recall mentioning before also that I think the Canadian writer Margaret Atwood said that perfect is the enemy of good. So if something is good enough, that's already great. So here's the concept I wanted to throw in here. It's the concept of wabi-sabi, which to me is just so interesting. It's a traditional Japanese concept, and it's both to do with aesthetics, but it's also a worldview. And it's about the acceptance of transience and imperfection. So it's about appreciating beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete in nature. Wabi-sabi nurtures all that's authentic by acknowledging three simple realities: nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect, or flawed beauty. And I think that's it's not just an excuse for me to accept my next finished object, but I think it's also relevant, and I think it allows us to give ourselves a little grace, maybe, to move on instead of demanding something that's beyond us. Okay, so let me explain why I'm talking about this at all. This is my finished weekender, and as you can clearly see here, there's a color difference. And I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know it, but I didn't know it until I washed and blocked the body. Strangely, in certain lights, certainly not this light, but in certain lights you can't see it. If I move it all the way up here, for instance, it's not quite as visible. It's still there. Okay, but I have worn it once or twice where it wasn't as obvious, maybe because it's around here. So there's little hills and valley already. Okay, so it is problematic, and you should avoid it, of course. It shouldn't actually happen, because they shouldn't have sold me 7 of the 7 last skeins, or 7 any skeins of a yarn and a color where the dye lot is not the same number. I mean, that's, no, that's not good. But the amazing thing to me is that I didn't notice it when I had all the balls of yarn lying around. So that's weird. I could have ripped out the whole thing down to here, front and back. But I had already bound off up here, and this yarn was lying there waiting. So I asked myself, how much effort do I want to put into this? How important is it to me? And I decided not that important. There was a moment, and I haven't actually quite decided that yet, but I was actually considering using some black yarn and embroidering wabi sabi on here, and then maybe on this panel, which it almost is, maybe even the Japanese signs. Not sure. Maybe it's probably a little too sort of, ooh, I'm all wabi sabi. That's not what I wanted. It would be a way of saying, okay, here it is. Here is the flaw. Why don't I just make the most of it by actually calling it what it is and embroidering wabi sabi on there? I might still try. I think black yarn could be fun using a kind of cursive handwriting. So I might try, or I might just leave it as it is. The fit is nice. I really enjoyed knitting it. It was kind of a walk in the park, simple, and there's something to be said for simple. I had just knitted the snow crocus, which was not a walk in the park. It was fantastic, but complex. And this one was not complex. There was just a lot of knitting, so that's enjoyable. So I used up pretty much the 7 balls of yarn, but only, if we can move away from the fact that this bit is of a different color, then I still think it's a really nice sweater. And I have this idea that next summer, when the sunlight is going to be quite sharp again, I'm going to put it out in the sun and see if maybe the sunlight will bleach it a little. Is that completely naive? I don't know. I did show it to a friend who's a knitter, and she's like, nah, don't worry about it. And I thought, oh, okay, I won't. Anyhow, moving away from that, I was also a little worried whether I would be playing yarn chickens, because, as I said, I only had those 7 balls of yarn. And so I didn't make it that long, because, of course, I wanted to make sure I had enough for the sleeves, and I didn't really want 3/4 length sleeves. So when I was finished, I actually did have a bit of yarn left. And what I did was I made this little, I wouldn't call it cowl, because it's not. It's a detachable turtleneck. So I figured, why don't I just knit that so I can wear it underneath the sweater and pretend it's a turtleneck. For when I wear this, then I don't necessarily need a scarf. And it's just the same kind of ribbing as the garment, and then just the split, like the split hem, just splitting it here. And I just did pretty much what I had yarn for, and that was just very simple. And I also used the tubular bind off, cast on and bind off, which I think is just delightful. It's really pretty. And this is as much yarn as I have left. So I feel pretty happy about having used up that yarn. And I'm going to throw this away probably, because I just don't want to have all these scraps lying around. So here again, I went with the smallest size because the yarn is quite a bit thicker. It reminds me a little of the Big Birdie. It's probably a little thinner than the Big Birdie. But as you can see here, they're pretty similar in texture. Yeah, the Big Birdie is thicker, but it's certainly similar. And I think it worked quite nicely for the weekender. So in order to figure out the measurements that I wanted, I measured it against another sweater that I have to figure out what was the size I wanted. And I used a 5mm needle throughout, except for the ribbing where I used 4.5mm. So that would be 5mm is US 8, 4.5 would be US 7. And oh yeah, I think I already talked about it last time, that when I had finished up to here, I realized that my gauge was off because it changed when I started knitting flat. So I ripped back and change that. And up here, because I tried it on first and found out that the front was a little too high up, sort of choking me a little. And so I closed, before I bound them off together, I closed or bound off for the neck, and then I knitted a few more rows. So you can see here there's like a rounded collar kind of, so it's not just one long boat, which of course is deviating from the pattern, but to me it just made it a little easier on my throat here. Deviating, it's a modification. Also, what I realized was when I had knitted up to here and bound off, I think I'd knitted maybe either the front or the back, and tried it kind of on, and I felt like the armhole was all the way up here. And Jackie from the Knitting a Good Yarn podcast has just been talking about that in their most recent episode, her and Carmen's most recent episode, about the length between your shoulder and your underarm. And clearly there's a big difference between our different body proportions. And she had to fudge or do something to extend, and I certainly had to do that as well. So I was supposed to knit up to maybe like here, and then this was the armhole. Well, there was no way that was going to be able to fit my arm, and it's not because I'm huge here, I don't think, but it something, I don't know, because my arms, that's not, that's relevant when you get to here. So I think I made this armhole maybe like 3 or 4 centimeters longer. So that's maybe 1.5 inches longer, something like that. Because otherwise I just wouldn't have an armhole that was big enough. That also, of course, gave me some extra room for my sleeves, which I knew already would be a good idea. Actually, looking in my notes, I was supposed to stop up here when this bit was 9 centimeters. And I think I ended up with knitting 15 centimeters. So that's quite a bit more. Once again, I did German short rows instead. I think, oh yeah, this is actually the pattern that calls for wrap and turn, not Caitlin Hunter's. I think she tells you to do whatever short rows you want. So I did German short rows here again, simply because it's what I'm used to. So I'll, of course, put the different specifications on Ravelry in as far as I remember it. And I'll also try to insert a little clip, if I haven't already, of me wearing it. And it's really soft, and I really enjoy working with the brushed alpaca. It's a delightful yarn, and it's affordable, and you can knit some really cozy but sort of slouchy, luxurious garments, I find. Oh, by the way, I also had to do the Kitchener stitch, which is not something that's used very often, or at all, maybe, in Danish patterns. At least I haven't met it in any Danish patterns. So I had to check that video a number of times, but suddenly it sort of clicked. I could remember it, and it's nice to be able to do those different techniques a little more automatically. Oh, something else. When I started working flat up here, I forget if I already mentioned that in the previous video, but I found out that my gauge was off. It was looser than down here, where I think I was using a 5mm needle, and then up here, in order to correct that, since I knit it back and forth, which it's called in Danish frem og tilbage, is when you knit flat. I had 5mm on one end and 4.5 on the other, so that I would do the purl stitches a little tighter, and that worked. So that could be a tip if you find out that you have that. And it's strange because I think when I made the Ureum top this summer, was that the similar situation, or was it the opposite situation? At least I did something similar, and I've done it before as well. And I think a lot of people's gauge changes when you knit, depending on whether you knit in the round or flat. And you could, at least when you knit flat, if you know that it's your purl stitches that make it different, which presumably it is, because when you knit round, you knit only knit stitches. So it's the purl stitches that make it change. You can have just the one needle for the pearl stitches be a different size, up or down, depending on what your issue is. Okay, so I forgot a couple of things, so I'm going to insert myself into my own video here. And one of you at some point actually wrote to say, you don't need to do all that editing, you don't have to be perfect. And let me assure you, it's in no way got to do with me trying to be perfect. It's for things like these. I forget things, and also I often search for words, and then I'm mumbling and all sorts of things. Anyway, the things I forgot. Before I forget, somebody's no doubt also going to say, I prefer the styling without the white shirt under. And yes, actually I do too. But already now I can feel that it's just a tiny bit prickly here on my chest, so I'd have to find some kind of t-shirt that goes right to the edge. And right now I'm not wearing anything underneath it except for a bra. And I really like it. But, it's probably I'm going to wear it mostly with some kind of shirt or long sleeve t-shirt since it is warm. But I do like this as well. And I also just briefly wanted to give you the measurements of the garments, my finished objects. So the Soldotna that I'm wearing, Soldotna crop, I guess it's called, has a finished, the measurements has a finished bust circumference of 32.75 inches up to 75 inches, or from 83 centimeters to 172 centimeters, with an intended 4 inches or 10 centimeters of positive ease. Mine measures 108 centimeters, and so gives me about 19 centimeters of positive ease. And see, now I'm outside. Now the wildlife creeps up on me. The Weekender, I don't even think I said Andrea Maury, but I suspect everybody knows. But that has a finished bust circumference of 39.5 inches up to 72.5 inches, or 105 centimeters up to 184 centimeters, with up to 10 inches or 25 centimeters of positive ease. Mine measures 106 centimeters around, or 41.5 inches. And that's on an 89 centimeter or 35 inch bust. So that gives me about 15 centimeters or 6 inches of positive ease, which is less than what she's wearing. But for one thing, this is chunkier yarn. For another, as you know, I only had the 7 balls of yarn, so I was limited in that sense. But the other sweater I have in this yarn is more oversized, so it's nice not to have the same silhouette, the same fit every time, I felt. And also, I just wanted to say that if you wanted to make something like this, or a detachable turtleneck, you simply, what I did at any rate, was I held up the garment like this with the ribbing part, because I knew I wanted to make it in the ribbing since it was the top. And then when I'd sort of taken that length, I just counted the number of stitches for the ribbing, and voila, that was pretty simple. Can I just also mention something that is, I don't know if it's available where you are, and I have no recollection of how I got it. I've had it for 100 years or so. It's a tape measure that has centimeters on one side and inches on the other. It's very useful, I find. Something else for the leftover Big Birdie that I thought of was that I could also make one of those shrugs, ubiquitous shrugs. I think they're cute, and you can really play around with the colors. I'm just sort of, I don't know if I would wear it. And there's another thing. The reason why I'm wondering if I would wear it is that we bicycle a lot in Denmark, and if I put my arms forward like that, it's going to sort of move up. Of course, then I can just wear it as a cowl, I guess. Jury's still out on that. And I would be tempted to maybe add another color so it's not the exact same as this. Oh my gosh, the sun now. The lighting is, needless to say, slightly better out here, but it's also chilly. Okay, so let me show you what I've been working on since I cast this off. And actually, I began it when I was about here, because every now and then I was like, I don't know, what colors do I want? And then, it's autumn now in Denmark, so sometimes it was a little too dark for me to properly assess what colors I wanted. So I decided to cast on something else to be able to knit at night that I didn't have to look at, where I didn't have to look at colors. And then the following day I would perhaps continue. And I also find that it's nice to have two different projects for me whose maybe essentially, at least what I was a monogamous knitter, and I found that I like to have more than one project on my needles. Projects that are different, one that's maybe just pure stockinette and one that's a little more involved, because you're in different frames of mind throughout the day or throughout the week. So that's nice. I actually decided to use the yarn from Paris that I bought recently, and I still have the 3 patterns that I showed you last time on my radar. And also thanks for some of your other suggestions. I keep on adding to that list of things that I like. But it was a little tricky because when I started swatching using a 3mm needle, it was just, it took forever to knit a swatch. Obviously it would, because it's fingering weight. But then I was like, is that what I want? It's going to, first of all, take a long time. And either I go up a needle and the yarn becomes a little see-through, or the fabric becomes a little see-through. I don't really like that so much. I want it to be, a regular kind of fabric. And also I was afraid I was not going to have enough yarn for the garment that I wanted. I didn't want, for instance, a Soldotna, or not a Soldotna. I didn't want a ranunculus where the sleeves were like up here. I want it to be further down. So I wasn't sure. Maybe I could have done it, but it would have been on 3mm needles. And also somebody said to me, let me see, a viewer wrote to say, maybe don't knit a complex pattern in order to see the yarn more clearly. And that comment kind of stuck with me. Somebody else did suggest not to use silk mohair in order not to alter the colors too much, in order that you could still see the flecks. And I thought about that as well. But then I swatched with Isa silk mohair in like a rosy off-white, and it looked nice. But I was afraid that it would be a little maybe too, not rosy, but since this yarn is blue and mint with a hint of purple, I didn't really want that. This is the yarn. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe it's too bright. I just love this color so much. You saw it in my last video if you've seen that one. So you can see there's a little bit of turquoise, green, light blue with some purple specks. So it's just a really lovely yarn. So this was the Cache Merino from La Bien-Aimée that I picked up in Paris. And okay, so going back to the swatching, I tried swatching with that silk mohair and I ended up on, I think, 4.5mm, and it looked nicer. But then I remembered another Danish yarn brand whose colors, or whose yarns, whose silk mohair yarns specifically, I've been wanting to try out, because they're supposed to be a little softer because they have alpaca in it. So less mohair, and I think it's the mohair that sometimes, it is the mohair that sometimes feels a little prickly on my skin. And I remember that about a year ago or so, I ordered these little cards from them. Obviously they're very expensive to make for any yarn producer, but I chose certain colors, the ones that I felt these were possibly in my future. So there's a lot here. They're all really nice. And instead of going with, this was very rosy, so I didn't want that. That would make it too different. But this off-white was purely off-white and not at all sort of rose-colored. This was a little too warm. So I found this one, which was a very icy blue. I don't know if you can see it. And I actually unraveled this little thing and made a couple of, I was able to knit maybe 3 or 4 rows with it. And that looked pretty nice. It looked like the yarn had just become a little thicker, but it looked exactly the same. You can see here that it's very thin, so it's definitely lace weight. So the fingering plus the lace, I guess, is that sport or heavy fingering? sport, probably. And so I decided to run with that for a little frostier look. So if you see it, I don't know if you can see it here. This is it looks so bright here. You can't see it properly. I'm going to try to put it in different places so you can see it. So this is Crea Deluxe, this Danish yarn brand. And it's, I think it's soft. It's quite soft. It's not as prickly as another one I just put against my neck earlier this morning. So that's the combination I decided to try. And I also decided on a completely different pattern because I thought it was a good point that you don't necessarily want too much going on with both a complicated pattern with either lace or cables or whatever. I mean, it looks good. I agree. It does look good. But I could also see the point. And then suddenly there's a pattern that came to mind, which is completely, I hadn't really thought about it. I'd seen it earlier in the year or this summer. And now I have all sorts of things tangled up in these barber cords because I've just separated for sleeves. I've only just separated for sleeves. And it's the blouse number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. So this is as far as I've gotten. And I quite like it. It looks, I don't know, more dramatic somehow on screen. A little more muted here. Yeah, for instance, this line, I hadn't even noticed that. So everything just looks different on the screen. So maybe there you can see it a little more clearly. And it's a really simple, long-sleeved kind of t-shirt, blouse. And I really love the simplicity of it. I think it's elegant and I think it's casual at the same time. So I suspect I'm going to get quite a lot of wear out of it. There's lots of stockinette, but at the very beginning, it's an interesting construction because the sleeve is made with this contiguous method, which is really interesting, where you knit in the round and then you just decrease or increase for the sleeves like this. So it's not a raglan, it's not a drop shoulder, it's something different, and I really like it. It's just it's very seamless, and at the same time there's a tiny seam so you can see it. And then I think the pattern gives you the option of making an I-cord towards the end instead of this rolled boat neck, but I don't think I'm going to make an I-cord because I do like a boat neck and it's not very wide. So I'm looking forward to continuing on this. And it's not, since that silk mohair is so thin, I think it's actually thinner than the Isea. I mean, these are gossamer thin, so thin. I mean, look at this. So thin. But it just adds that extra weight, if you will, that enabled me to get gauge. And it's interesting because there are many designers where I clearly knit more tightly, but with My Favorite Things knitwear, I've used the recommended needle size. This is now the 3rd time that I knit one of her patterns, and I use that one. So that's kind of nice to feel that, okay, I don't have to modify so many things. And it's also kind of surprising to me that with a fingering plus lace weight, you can use a needle. I'm knitting on a 5mm needle. And it doesn't look see-through at all. So go figure. And I think it's going to kind of be kind of a staple piece, even though the yarn is completely sort of whoa. The garment here is so simple and versatile, I feel. And I really like those pieces that are at once casual yet elegant. You know, they're easy to wear. The original pattern calls for silk from Knitting for Olive held double. So this is a bit of a departure for that. But if you get gauge, I think that's fine. And I may be tempted to make a silk version also at some stage. Although I will have to say, this has taken many hours. And I'm not very far. So there's a lot of stockinette here. But it's just nice to knit something that's simple, I think. I'm not actually sure if I have enough yarn left, if I have enough of the La Bien-Aimée yarn for the whole long-sleeved garment. I don't know. If I don't, I ordered an extra skein of this because I figured if I don't have enough, then I might do a little sort of modification either at the end of the sleeves, not quite at the end, but somewhere on the sleeves or on the body, which is where I thought of one of Iri Shimizu's patterns where she has like a panel of just silk mohair. So I might add that if I find out I don't have enough. I wanted to say about the blouse number 1 that it's a transitional knit to me, and another reason why I wanted to make it right now is that probably in early November I'm gonna be going to Nice in southern France as a travel guide, and I figured if I could finish it by then it would be a perfect knit for Nice, maybe. Stay tuned. Okay, I think that's it when it comes to work in progress. That's the only thing I have on my needles right now because I just finished this the day before yesterday. So let me just briefly share with you some of the things that I have planned for this autumn and winter. Insofar as my plans are indicative of what I actually end up knitting. I think for me, that quote, by John Lennon, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. I love planning. It's so fun, and make lists and all that. It's, add to Ravelry, take away from the favorites, moving something else in there. But often I go with something completely different, apropos the blouse number 1. But it's still fun, and some of them will sort of simmer in the background. And then you remember a while back, well, I'm still thinking about the sweater, so maybe I should just make it. So it can be fun to plan. It can also be a little hubris inducing for me, because sometimes planning a lot will precisely make me abandon those plans. Yeah, I'm weird that way. I don't know if you've heard of the American author called Gretchen Rubin, but she has this thing where I think she's written a book. I know on her website she has, you can take a test called the 4 tendencies. And there are these 4 tendencies that we typically all fall into. I have a friend who makes lists. The minute she makes these lists, she knows she feels obligated. So she's obligated to herself. Then I have somebody else who likes to go for a run with other people. So she's obligated to other people. Then there are people who are both obligated to sort of other people and to themselves. And then there are the ones who are obligated to neither. And guess what group I fall into? Well, it doesn't sound very nice, but I'm the last one. And they're called rebels. And it's not as if I don't, I'm very into, I get very offended when somebody runs a red light and stuff like that. These are the rules that we all need to be aware of. There's a certain sense of solidarity in society. But when it comes to my own personal sort of actions, the minute I make a list the night before, I'll make a list and go, right, this is what I have to do the next morning. The next morning I'm like, who are you to tell me what to do? I'll say that to myself. So I'm not very good at doing that always. I'll wake up and go, what do I feel like doing? And the same goes with my knitting plans to some extent. So these are just some of the things that I might knit. Some things I know for sure I'm going to knit, and some of them I might not knit at all. It's like there are the runners up, and then there are the ones that are for sure going to make it. And my overall plan is actually, apropos again, the blouse number 1, to use what I have. And if that means having to buy an extra yarn, as I did here, in order to meet gauge or in order to buy enough yarn, well, then so be it. Because I think I've a number of times, both in, actually mainly when I was in New York earlier in the year, I bought single skeins of things, and I don't know quite what to do with that. So they're just sort of lying around. And I don't feel like just putting it into a tiny cowl just for the sake of it or something. I want to use it for something that I want to knit. So I'm going to try to see if I can actually use up more of my yarn, at least with every other project. And again, I say that now, but yeah, okay. So apart from finishing my blouse number 1, one of the next things that I'm going to be doing is doing a test knit for Aegyo Knit. She, and along with, Petite Knit and My Favorite Things Knitwear and other loops and events and maybe a few more Danish designers are all contributing with a pattern to a collection by Især in the after Christmas, I think, called Især Archives, and I will be testing Egenit's contribution. I've already seen most of the sweater, and you will maybe have seen some of it on Instagram if you follow her or them. I don't have the yarn yet, but I've chosen the yarn, and I'm going to be using Især yarn Marilyn or Marilyn in this sort of dusty rose color, and either using a silk mohair in a peachy color that sort of matches it, or something that's lighter, unless it will marl it too much. So that's coming up soon when she's got the pattern ready and when I can get hold of the yarn. So I'm excited about that. That should be interesting. And I actually also have another exciting test knit coming up for Yamagara, who's a designer based in Singapore, and she reached out to me and asked me would I like to test knit that pattern for her. And I had already seen it on her page, and I thought it was just amazing. And she assumed I was too busy. I didn't want to do it, but well, I am probably a little too busy and probably shouldn't say no to 2 test knits at the same time. But it's bulky weight, and it was just too beautiful for me to say no. So I'm going to be test knitting this amazing cardigan for her that has these huge statement sleeves. And then the body of the cardigan is kind of short and boxy. So I thought that was just really cool and beautiful. The sleeves, the pattern on the sleeves is made using intarsia. So we'll be revisiting that. I haven't done that in over 20 years. So that's going to be exciting. I'm not 100% sure about the yarn yet. She uses yarns that I can't readily get here. She has one version where she uses woolfolk yarn, and it's really beautiful. But when I saw her white and blue, dark blue version, which I thought was black, I knew I wanted to make a white and black version. And the sleeves kind of remind me a little of like a Finnish designer called Marimekko, that kind of pattern. So it's very sort of big flowers. So I wanted the high contrast look there. It would look beautiful in almost any color, but I haven't made that sort of thing. So I thought that could be fun. So I have that lined up. I might use the Danish yarn Snifnuk from Kamerose because it's got sort of the same thickness or weight, and they have black and white. So I might. That's my thought right now, that I might get hold of that because they have it at my local yarn shop. So that's also a plus, obviously. So that's maybe something I might get around to buying one of these days. The test knit won't begin until next week, but then I will have my yarn ready. And then let me see. Yeah, for sure pattern. I've talked about this before, and it's maybe a little annoying that sometimes I mention things several times, but if you don't get around to it, then So let me just collect the yarn here for another project. It might not be until after Christmas, but it is for sure going to happen because I have the yarn, and in this case it's a kit. So I can't use the yarn for anything else, and I don't want to either because I absolutely think this pattern is just so amazing. It's the Fox Thoughts pullover by Pom Pom magazine, and this is a little ridiculous, but I think this is pretty much the yarn. Yeah, so there's some absolutely beautiful colors. It's La Bien-Aimée, and it's a mix of Helix and Felix. So I mean, hello, this is just so beautiful. Look at all these delightful colors that are going to be used together. I mean, let me just see if I can move them a little closer to the camera so you can get kind of an idea. Look at all these colors. They're so beautiful. Very different. So of course they're going to make up the color work. God. And then this color called Undergrowth is going to make up the body and the sleeves. So I can't wait to get started on that. I've been feeling quite impatient, especially since I know it's, I've known for a long time that I want to knit this since I bought the yarn back in, was that March or April, when there was suddenly free shipping on La Bien-Aimée, and I thought, okay, here we go. And also No, there wasn't. Maybe there wasn't free shipping, but suddenly this kit was available after having not been available for a long time. And I've been eyeing the pattern for a long time. I think since I saw it on the cover of that Pom Pom magazine. Yeah, so I'm very excited about that project at some point. I'm not sure when. Maybe, as I said, after Christmas, if I can get everything else done by then, because I do have a few other plans. Because when I bought that yarn, I thought, well, if I'm going to pay for shipping, might as well get more La Bien-Aimée yarn. Very indulgent. This is also why I'm knitting from stash now. But one of the colors that I got was, I'd seen a pullover by Sarah Nordland called Aurelia, with a lot of cables, and it's just really beautiful. That color that she knitted in is one of those colors that I certainly haven't gotten around to yet. I'm not sure it looks good on me. I think it's going to probably wash me out. No doubt some stage I'll get to it, just because it's got that autumny vibe, and I do like that. It's a beautiful color, sort of copper. But I had already seen another yarn that I thought was just so beautiful, so I want to make it in that. And it's also La Bien-Aimée, and it's this mix between red and pink. And the color is delightfully called Amy's Flashy Lipstick. And I really love it. I love it so much. So probably I'm going to knit it in that. And this is Merino DK Superwash. And yeah, okay, Superwash. But I can't knit with very rustic yarns, as I've gone on about at length, because it's just too scratchy for my skin. So, and they have some absolutely amazing colors. So I hope it's going to look good with cables. Let's see. At least that's a plan right now. I have the pattern, I have the yarn. And of course, I also have this yarn. This is not just me showing you all the yarn, but since one of my plans really is to knit with the yarn that I have, I just wanted to show you this again. This is the Sonder yarn that Carmen brought with her when I had the chance to buy it and have it move over here, because Sonder yarns sadly don't ship to Europe yet, or ship internationally at all. So my plan is to make the Easy Like Sunday Morning, designed by Melissa Clulo, who is also the genius behind Sonder yarn. But then I've been a little in doubt as to whether I should make that pattern with this yarn, and no doubt I'll make it at some stage, because I do like the pattern. But then I've been wondering, should I maybe use this for another pattern? I'm not sure. But then Jackie from the Knitting a Good Yarn podcast mentioned that Melissa Clulo had actually been swatching with this combination for the Euros by Aeguknit, and I was like, oh, of course, so I can't really unhear that, can I? So that's also been at the back of my mind. And I think also because the Easy Like Sunday Morning sweater, I really like the boxy fit of it, and I like the neck, but I'm a little apprehensive about the sleeves, because I like the kind of drop shouldery effect. And I also like the drape of a lot of fabric here, but I don't like the bat wing thing too much. I don't want it to be all the way down here. So I know already I'm going to be trying to modify something. But I will probably be modifying the ears when I get to that at some stage also, because I don't want it quite as wide as the original is. So I'm not sure. It is nice to maybe have at the back of my mind a simple knit like the Easy Like Sunday Morning, especially if I'm going to, at some stage, hopefully not before too long, get to the fox thoughts. That could be sort of a tandem knit, the simple stockinette, the color work. Yeah, that balance. Another thing I have lined up, Beata from New York, a viewer who I talked about in a previous video where I'd been to New York, and she helped us get into the Empire State Building because she works there, or worked. And she gave me this yarn that she has made herself, that she's spun herself. So I definitely want to make a hat from this. I'm not quite sure which hat, but that's definitely in my future this winter. And then probably I won't have time. But when I bought this, one of the reasons why I was also drawn to this is that I had already bought the Cashmerino from La Bien-Aimée in New York. And you may remember it in this luscious color called Fluo Morganite, which I simply love. And since this is not variegated or speckled, I think it's safer here to knit something that has structure or cables or lace or something. So I've been thinking about that so much. But again, it's very thin, it's fingering. And I'm not sure if I have enough yarn for the things I've looked at. So I've been thinking about, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. I've been thinking about buying the Kumo in the same color and knitting a cardigan, because I saw Amy from Le Bien-Aimé in a cardigan, not in this base, but the same color. I think it was Andre Maury's little yellow cardigan or little yellow sweater, which is lovely. The sleeves are very tight on that, so I would definitely have to do something there. But either that, or I think I already have a cardigan pattern by Camilla Ved, the Danish designer. She has a chunky magnolia cardigan that I think would also look really nice with this, and it would be sort of obvious if I pair it with the Kumo, because then it would be more chunky. It would also be really nice. The Kumo is the La Bien-Aimée Suri alpaca, and to me that's also a little softer than silk mohair, so that could be an option. So I would like to be able to use this and not have it lying around. Then I'm also going to be knitting, as I said, too many plans, and let's see how many of them come to fruition. But I'm also going to be probably knitting the Aegyo sweater by Aegyo Knit. Caroline would like to have a little update of the pattern, and I saw the pattern already back when they first started as knitwear designers, and I just thought, oh, that is just so lovely and luxurious yet cozy, and so I had it at the back of my mind for a long time. So I'm probably going to be knitting that, and then giving the pattern a once over. So if any of you have that pattern, or you're planning to knit it, or you've had problems with it, please let me know, email me. I will put all the details. Everything from this video will be under the video in the show notes. I always forget to say that. But I will probably be using an off-white yak yarn for that. I don't have it yet either. It's on its way, I think. So I will show you that in the next video if I get to it, if I've gotten to it by then. But I like a good cabled sweater, as you can tell. And it's an oversized, really, I think it's just a really lovely sweater. I really do like her bubblegum pink version, but as I've already chosen the pale pink for the test knit for her, I'm gonna go with white. And it's not quite white. I don't want to say dirty white, because that doesn't sound very appealing. But since it's yak, I think there's a little sort of something dark from the yak in the yarn, which should also add something to the pattern, I think, or to the garment. And then finally, one of the things I would really like to knit is a shawl. But I keep sort of stalling. I keep not finding out which one, because I don't know what yarn to choose. And that's because of my sensitive skin, because a shawl you want around your neck. And of course I can't have anything rustic, and I probably can't have silk mohairs either. So not sure. I've seen some really lovely ones in the 52 weeks of shawls from Line magazine. I think one is called Frost and another is called a Loft or something like that. I forget, but they're both gray and they're both really scrumptious. I've been eyeing them a lot, but I've also been looking at the Sophie shawl, which is just a basic shawl by Petite Knit, and I'd really like a shawl, especially when winter's around the corner here. But let's see what I found out. Oh, also, by the way, another dream knit, but one that is, I'm tempted to say definitely in my future, is this cardigan that I've seen that made me pre-order Sari Nordland's coming book. I think it's coming this week maybe, or next week. And it's a beautiful cardigan that gives me sort of 1920s vibes. It has a shawl collar, and it has a belt, which I quite like. And it reminds me of a cardigan I had years ago from this company called Day in Denmark. And it's a company that had this sort of again, it's the cozy but luxurious vibe. That sort of combo, I quite like that. And Sari's book also is photographed in Paris. So it's just, it was a no-brainer for me to buy it or pre-order it. It was a little expensive. Not the book, the postage, which I think she mentions in one of her recent videos where she talks about the patterns. But not so expensive that I didn't want to order it. And it's only in Finland, so it wasn't that bad. But I will keep you posted on that when I get the book. Probably won't be able to knit the cardigan yet because I don't have the yarn. She did mention in the video that the yarn for that pattern was actually Gilead, and I bought Gilead in New York, but I didn't buy it in that color. And it was, I think, also the color that drew me to it because it's kind of an off-white grayish melange, and the one I bought was pure gray. So, not sure about that. Oh yeah, also because years ago when I was a student, I had a semester where I lived in London. I was an intern at the United Nations Information Center. And at the time, there was this show on BBC or on an English channel, on one of the British television channels, or a series, not a show when it's Britain, called The House of Elliot. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it takes place in the 1920s, and it's about these two sisters that create a fashion house. And they wear so many beautiful garments and dresses and capes. It's whole sort of 1920s aesthetic. And at the time when I lived in London, there was a show or an exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum where they showed a number of the dresses from the show. And I pretty much camped there. I was there for hours, and I drew many of them because I was really into the 1920s aesthetic. And I was also really into costume history at the time. And that cardigan from Sari's book gives me those vibes. So I can definitely see myself in that in the future. One more thing in terms of plans. It's not really a plan, but it was definitely dream knitting. Because last week in Denmark, a magazine called Alt for Damerne came out, and it had this knitting supplement. And of course, this lovely sweater by Anne Wenzel was on the front. And that was the reason why I zoomed to the supermarket and bought this. And I really love it. I would be tempted to... She knitted this in a tweed, so you can see these little specks. I already know, I'm familiar with this tweed. I think it's Især tweed, and it's a little rustic for me. But when I first saw it, I thought it was pure black and white. So that I could imagine pure black and white. The only thing I'm hesitant about here is that once a pattern like this comes out, in a magazine like this, everybody in Denmark is going to knit it. So you're going to see many, many versions, or I'm going to see many versions of it. So that means I probably will feel satiated by that before I ever get to it myself. So I would still like to knit it at some point, probably, but I think the dust has to settle first. I also knitted the spot sweater by her like 2 years after it came out. So I'm kind of weird that way. Maybe it's the whole rebel thing again. I'm not sure. I just briefly wanted to mention just a few podcasts. I was asked by somebody at some stage what podcasts I watch, and many I watch every now and then from time to time. There's only maybe a few where I watch all of them. It depends on how often they come out, because there's only so much time you can spend watching anything, I guess, on a screen. But so I just wanted to mention a few more, and I will also try to mention others when I stumble upon others in the future or when I remember them. But definitely Skeins of Dreams, Mega. Mega is just so delightful. Part of her appeal to me is that she's delightful, she's humble, and she chooses some interesting patterns. We don't always share the patterns or share the same sort of colors. I think we both gravitate to the pink the pink colors, but she often goes with warmer colors, where I go with cooler colors, because we gravitate to different things, probably look good in different things, and that's interesting. It's nice that we can still get inspiration from each other. So she's definitely worth a look. Really delightful. And then there's also Knit and Grace. Mia, who's also really sweet and who has some of the same, I think, color scheme as Mega, but who's also a very sort of thorough person, very mindful of how she talks about things. She's also a sewer. She's also really sweet. And then there's a newer channel by two twins in the Midwest, I think, in the United States. The channel is called Those Twins Who Knit. They're quite sweet, and they have a really beautiful aesthetic. They knit a lot of Danish knitwear patterns, like everybody does, I think. But a lot of petite knit and my favorite things knitwear, but also a few other things. And they're both really sweet. Then I've watched Sarah Nordland's channel a few times. Then there's a couple of others, but I forget their names right now. I know the name of the channel, but not the name of the person. I'll mention them next time then. But then finally there's, I think her channel is called LA55. Her name is Andrea. She's also a really beautiful woman and a beautiful knitter, and she has some interesting takes on knitting. I think she's an artist and a really nice aesthetic, so I quite appreciate her videos as well. She's also a crocheter, which I'm very much not yet at any rate, so you might get some benefit from that as well. So those are just the ones I will mention now, and I'm sorry if I don't, it's difficult to, it's a little tricky to recommend, but this is just, saying, these are just some of the ones I'm watching these days, and I'm sure I'm going to watch different ones down the road. If you have suggestions, by all means, put them in the comments for everybody to see. Just wanted to briefly share what has brought me joy these past few weeks. 3 different things, quite different things, that I can also highly recommend. In very different sort of areas, I would say. A book, a TV show, and a beverage. Let me first do the beverage. I have no idea if you're going to be able to get it where you are, but I just thought it was funny that it's a rosé wine that I've been enjoying towards the end of summer and here in the middle of fall as well. But I just thought it was amazing that I was drinking this lovely rosé called, Lush, and it says Washington State, which of course is where this yarn is from and where sherry is from. So I just thought that was a sweet coincidence. And then I've been reading a book that is, it's not your sort of very light reading. I've also been listening to a number of novels, but this one it's made a huge impression on me. I haven't finished it yet, and I don't know if this is upside down, or not upside down. I don't know if this is reversed, but it's called Humankind by a Dutch author called Rutger Bregman, or probably Rutger or something. And it's a fascinating look into, humankind, but also how humans are innately kind and what it is that goes wrong when huge groups of people suddenly don't behave that way. And I think he's an anthropologist, and he gives us so many interesting anecdotes and historical perspectives and scientific research. I've written gasp and whoa and things like that out in the margin. I typically write in my books. I don't know why. It's just it's just really, really interesting, and also, as some people have said here, gives you hope, kind of. So highly recommend it. As I said, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying it. And on a completely lighter note, the final thing that has brought me so much joy recently is the TV series Lupin, which is this French TV series about this master thief played by Omar Sy, whom I just love. And it was just, the latest season came out a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago in Denmark, and I watched it all in 2 days, knitting furiously on this and blouse number 1. And it was just a joy. It's has just so many ingredients that I love. It's that sort of detective mystery thief thing, but then it plays with the timeline. So it'll show something, and then the day before or the previous day or 16 hours earlier, and it's just fun. And then it's Paris, and I was just like, ooh, I just went there, and ooh, I was just there. So yeah, I love that, and I can really highly recommend it if you're into that sort of thing. And that's it. Returning to myself in the living room now. And finally, let me just also say thank you for those of you who are participating in the Nordic Knit Along. I'm not, one of those modifiers who's just there all the time, because part of the point, I think, is for you to interact with each other, and you are, and I think that's just delightful. It's very inspiring to see where you're knitting. And I hope you will continue to share. So the Nordic Knit Along is still running. It's until the end of the year. And the prizes, I haven't got but there's 2 skeins of Isa alpaca. And I think I've got another one up my sleeve, another prize. And then there's a project bag that a delightful viewer from New Zealand has offered to make for a winner. And then there's a pattern by Agonit. Yeah, so thank you for participating in that. And if you're not participating, that's obviously completely all right. Whatever you're knitting on, I would love it if you want to share it in the comments. It's always fun to look up different patterns and get to know other designers than the ones I'm familiar with at present. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It's fall break here in Denmark, so the kids are out of school. And as I said, I might be going to Copenhagen on my birthday. And enjoy the fall here. And I hope the fall or spring is treating you kindly wherever you are. I send you so many thoughts of love and oneness and happy knitting. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for just showing up and being part of this community with me. I really, really appreciate it. So stay safe and happy knitting. All my love to you.